Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Grace City. My name is Nathan, and if I haven't met you yet, I'd love to meet you before you leave today. I'm excited you guys are here as we continue our series called Conversations with God. We're talking about prayer. We're looking at a lot of the passages in Scripture where Jesus prayed and some of the ways he modeled that, some of the ways he taught that. Today, we're going to take a look at a few things Paul had to say to the New Testament churches about prayer. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about my last week. It was a crazy week around here with Vacation Bible School, kind of kicking off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, Wednesday night, I had some friends from the Netherlands come to Jackson, Mississippi to spend a few days with me. I made a very good friend one semester, the spring semester of my sophomore year in college. He's actually Nigerian born, but Dutch educated, studied abroad in the metropolis that is Lubbock, Texas, the closest place on earth to heaven. And he and I connected there at Texas Tech University because we were suite mates for one semester. And he's 5 years older than me, but we just became really quick friends. It was an awesome thing. He spent some time with my family around Easter and then came back and spent some time in Houston after the semester was over. And we've just kept in touch ever since. So he and his family vacation in the United States every 3 or 4 years. And when they do, he has a brother that lives in Vegas and a sister that lives in Houston. When they do, they always figure out where we are and they come and visit us. And so they just happened to be on their way from Dallas to Miami, and it made sense to come through I-20 through Jackson, Mississippi. So I was kind of thinking about how do I entertain this family of 5? They actually have 6. They left their oldest daughter at home, but this family of 5 that's used to like The Hague in the Netherlands with beautiful, everything and all these pictures I see. And they're in Houston, they're in Dallas, they're in these big places with lots of things to do. And they're coming to Jackson for 3 nights. And it's like, all right, I can give them the 15-minute tour, but what do I do after that? It's like, what do I do? And if they were younger, I could have taken them to museums and things, but they had teenagers, and so I did what any of you might do, and we made plans on Friday to go to a water park. And so on Friday, we went to Philadelphia, went to Geyser Falls, and I had gone last year with my son Zeke when our youth ministry went, and I love a good water park. It's like the old youth ministry in me. I just love it, right? It's like there's no shame in anything, like there's no body shaming at a water park. You just go, you just enjoy it. It's amazing, right? And it's great on a hot summer day, as we've had plenty of those. But we didn't have a large enough car for both my family and Fred's family. His name is Fred, by the way. That's not his Nigerian name. But anyways, he's there. And so we didn't have enough people, a big enough car for all of us. And so I was driving just my son and my daughter to the water park and on the way home. And on the way home, Zeke's sitting next to me, and he has this tendency, a bad habit, if you will, of putting his fingers in his mouth. He's just kind of like something he fidgets and does with. And I have the same problem. The apple is not falling far from the tree. I literally have calluses on multiple fingers because I've chewed on my fingers since I was a very young kid. I noticed myself doing that literally last night. But I've gotten to this place where Zeke needs to learn not to do that, especially if he wants to work and do some different things that he's excited about doing in the years ahead. And so I've gotten to a place where when I see him do it out of the corner of my eye, I just say, Zeke, fingers. And he knows to pull them down. And I'm trying to remind him of that enough. And I don't want to get to a place where you have to go to greater lengths, but I'd like for him to get to a place where that's not such a habit. And you guys, anybody that's had a bad habit knows how hard that is to break. Well, as exemplified by my fingers. Well, my daughter, Maggie, who's 6 years old, was like, why does Zeke do that? Like, why does he always do that? I said, well, Maggie, it's a habit. It's something Zeke does that he doesn't even realize he's doing. Like, you have habits, I have habits, they're good and bad habits. And we're having this conversation, and she picks up on it. She's like, oh, you mean like how I chew on my toes? Which, yes, we're getting very vulnerable here. But since she was like 3, Maggie's, obviously at a young age, she's limber enough. And one day she'll watch this back and go, Dad, thanks so much. But, she'll put her toe. Like, there was a point where she was 3, I was like, are you going to eat your toes? Like, that was like how bad it was. And she's gotten much better about it. I said, yes, Maggie, like you eat your toes. Or like how mommy picks at her fingers. And so she's starting to jive. And then she's like, or you mean like the way that you, and she starts listing off multiple things that she notices I do. Like how you chew on your fingers. Yes, Maggie, how I chew your fingers. And how you do this. Yes, Maggie, how I do that. And how you pick your nose. Yes, Maggie, how I pick my nose. Like all of those things. Yes. Those are all bad habits. And those are things that we shouldn't do. And there are good habits, there are bad habits. And you know what I'm talking about. Well, the reason I'm talking about habits is because we've been talking about prayer for a few weeks, and we talked about Jesus' model prayer in the Lord's Prayer that we know. And last week we talked about the way that he demonstrated and also taught that it's important for us to find solitude in prayer, and that eliminating distractions and finding a place where we're not going to be interrupted and finding a place where we can give him our sole focus is a very important part of praying and having this conversation with God, where we can both communicate with him and be open to anything he might have to say in response prompts or in prompting us. But that's not the only thing the Bible has to say about prayer either. In fact, the way the Bible mostly talks about prayer is this ongoing, almost habitual benefit that we have from keeping that line of communication open with God at all times. And Paul, one of the great, early church planners and the writer of most of the New Testament letters, is signing off at the end of Thessalonians. If you want to turn, we're going to be in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 to kind of get started today. But he's signing off on this letter towards the end of this letter, and it's almost like he's giving them a quick, short list of reminders of all of the things that he's already taught them and probably already demonstrated or lived out for them. He's modeled for them in a way. And I think about this list of things he says, and I almost think about the way that a parent dropping their child off at college might think. Or maybe when you were dropped off at summer camp. Like your mom has 4 or 5 things, and she's like, hey, brush your teeth every day, make sure you take a shower, change your underwear, whatever it is. It's like the 4 or 5 things that are like, these are things that are important in this house. I lived with my uncle and aunt one summer when I was working my way through law school, and I was serving at a law firm in Dallas. And I remember the first day I went to my aunt and uncle's house, and I'd stayed there many times. My uncle sat me down. I was like, hey, here's a room. We'd love for you to have it. We are so excited that you're here. Just know that in this house, we all make our bed every day. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting, which is cool because I should have taken advantage of the 6 weeks I lived there to form that into a habit, because I still struggle with making my bed every day, but it was just something that they did, something that they raised their children to do. Well, Paul, you can tell, has some similar things that he wants every follower and believer of Christ, every member of one of these churches that he's planted and kind of guided to fall into. And so we're going to pick it up in chapter 5, verse 16, with this list of things that Paul gives them. He says, starting in 16, he says, rejoice always. Pray constantly. Give thanks in everything, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Don't stifle the Spirit. Don't despise prophecies, but test all things and hold on to what is good. And finally, stay away from every kind of evil. So you have these 7 verses, and you have this list of the things. It's like, hey, make sure you brush your teeth. Make sure you bathe every day. Make sure you do these things. And really, if you think about it, it's kind of 3 do's and 3 don'ts with a little bit of explanation for some of those and some justification. So he starts, and by the way, this could be like a 6-part series, but we're not turning into that today. So we're not going to go real deep into all of these, but rejoice always. Rejoice literally is be happy, be cheerful. Have a positive outlook on your situation or on life. It very literally, if you're translating the Greek word, it's very close to grace. And so it's delight in the grace of God. Like you should have a smile on your face at all times. Now think about that in light of, you, right? And I'm not going to call anybody by name because that'll get me in trouble. But some of us struggle having a smile like even 10% of the time, right? And if that's not you, you probably know somebody that doesn't have that. Now, what Paul is saying is that if you're a Christian, you have all the reason you need to have a pretty cheerful, joyful, happy experience in life, regardless of your circumstances and your situations. And specifically what he's saying is that there are things that have already happened that you have taken benefit of, specifically the death and resurrection of Jesus, that has allowed you to find life where you had death, that has allowed you to find purpose and direction where you were lost, that allows you all these things that happened already, and that has already happened in your life. You have claimed your place in God's family as Jesus has been your Savior. And that should be enough for you to delight in the grace of God. But that's not even it, because it's not just what's already happened. It's because of what's already happened. You know how the story ends. You know that no matter how bad things get right now, and I know they can get very bad, that in the end, you get to be with Jesus forever in paradise, in this new heaven, this new earth. So regardless of your circumstances, you have every rhyme and reason and every justification for rejoicing always. Like life should be a party for you. And the problem is most of us look at the life of the party and go, oh, look at that guy, he's the life of the party. And like that guy gets the stigma. And the way Paul talks about it is almost like, hey, if you're not, what's going on? Have you forgotten what God's already done? Have you forgotten how your story is going to end? I love that. Maybe we'll do a series on that sometime. Pray constantly, or if you're in the ESV, it's going to be pray without ceasing. You're going to see that. And this isn't like, hey, don't talk to anyone else because you don't want to be interrupted. This is like at all times be ready to communicate to God, and at all times be listening for his voice. Verse 18, give thanks in everything, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Be thankful. Look what he says, always, constantly, and in everything. It's almost like he's saying that at all times and in all circumstances, you should be cheerful, you should be ready to communicate with God or open to him communicating with you, and you should always be grateful for the things that you have and the things that God's done. But it's not just about the 3 do's, because there's 3 do nots, right? Do not stifle the Spirit. God is at work around you. He's at work in your life. He's given you gifts. To stifle the Spirit would be to say no to something that God has equipped you and called you to do. To stifle the Spirit would be to hold somebody else down because you're not comfortable with them experiencing or expressing or living out their particular gifts. To stifle the Spirit would be like, God, I think you're trying to do something in this neighborhood or in the company that I'm a part of or in this school that you have led me to, and I'm just not on board with that. And so I'm not going to actively work against you, but I'm certainly not going to come along for the ride of the Spirit. He says, don't do that. Don't despise prophecies. A prophecy in this time would be any time somebody would say, this is the word of the Lord. So it could be someone who's opening the scripture and trying to explain things or apply things that have already been written and communicated by God to a modern context, kind of like what I do on a Sunday. But it could also be someone who may have just had a vision or who felt like the Lord has laid something on their heart. And they stand up in front of a group of friends or believers like this and says, hey, I got a word for the Lord. I want to share this with you. It says, don't despise prophecies. One, don't be jealous because you don't feel like God has communicated with you, and don't just discount them maybe because they seem out of left field or they don't seem consistent with like maybe what God has said to you in the past. But he kind of gives you some qualification. Don't despise prophecies. Don't just dismiss them. Be curious. Test all the things and hold on to what is good. Be open to the fact that God might actually reveal something to someone else that you can benefit from. And you'll know it's consistent. You'll know it's good because it lines up with what God has already said, what he's already done, and who he's revealed himself to be in the scripture. If it's inconsistent with who God has said in the Bible, then we know it's not good. And dismiss it. Great. But don't let your first inclination be like, oh, that doesn't sound right. I'm going to dismiss it. Test it and hold on to what is good. And then the last do not is really kind of stated, stay away from every kind of evil, right? That's like when your mom drops you off at camp or at college or whatever. It's like, hey, make sure not to hang out with the bad kids. Don't go looking for trouble. And that's what Paul's saying. Like, recognize that there is this spiritual battle being fought at all times around you. Align yourself with the forces of God and do not put yourself in a place where you can be a victim of evil or maybe even used by evil, unfortunately. Right? So this is what we're going with. And you can imagine where we're going today because we're talking about prayer. We're going to look at 1 Thessalonians 5:17. And we're going to think about what this command to pray constantly, or the ESV, pray without ceasing. The NIV maybe says it my favorite way, pray continually. And the NLT is my favorite translation to read personally, by the way. I love this. They channel journey, right? Don't stop believing, never stop praying. You know, I mean, like that's where it is. That's like the journey version. That's just from me. You're welcome. So like if Steve Perry had it, never mind. Okay, we could go way down a rabbit hole there. But they're all trying to say the same thing. And that isn't from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, find yourself a private place like we talked about last week and just spend your entire day and your entire existence in this place where you're solely focused on communicating with God. What they're talking about and what they're really trying to allude to is this type of prayer or an attitude or posture of communication where you have a continual open line of communication with God, meaning I can always get a hold of him and he can always get a hold of me. That my first inclination when I experience something would be to talk to God about it. Maybe not to text my friend or call my wife, but hey, the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to talk to God about it. So this continual ongoing conversation. It doesn't mean that every time we feel like we have to talk to God, we have to go find that secret private place we talked about last week. It means we develop the skill of being able to pray in our own little silent voice, even when we're in a room like this. Right? You may be sitting here and you're like, Nathan's really struggling this morning. Like, I would appreciate you not running out to go pray somewhere, but like in your mind, like, Lord, help Nathan. He is off the rails. You know, like that would be a helpful thing for me. And that's something that you should develop the ability to do. But even more than the ability to communicate privately is also to discern and be able to recognize the voice of God when you're surrounded by so many other voices at a particular time. It's the way that like my daughter or my son, I remember this back in the day, like before Chick-fil-A closed down all of their little playgrounds or whatever, like there was one in our particular neighborhood that was just always full of kids. And of course my kids, like any other kid, loved going and playing on the little play area. And my son, when he was young, would go and play, and he'd be up in one of the tubes and he'd be hanging out there and he's stimming because of all of his issues and things like that. But I could literally just open the door and go, Zeke, time to go, and close it. And I mean, I'm not competing with the volume of that room in any way. Like I can because God has given me that gift, but I didn't choose to do that, right? Like I just said, Zeke, time to go, close it up. And like clockwork, within 60 seconds, my son is down and out that door. And it's this ability my son had because he spent so much time with me to recognize my voice. Like, oh, that's my dad. He's calling me. And God's inviting us to develop the ability and the skill to hear his voice, even when everything in our life is chaotic and busy and loud. And so kind of what we're talking about a little bit this morning is this idea about ongoing prayer. And I truly believe the Bible teaches that ongoing dialogue with God throughout your day allows you to connect with him, to overcome anxiety. I'm not talking about like clinical anxiety that you need to talk to somebody about, but like just the things that you worry about and are scared of on a day-to-day basis. Express gratitude and experience his presence in any circumstance. This, I believe, is one of the greatest benefits of always keeping that line of communication open with God. And so we're going to kind of talk through it a little bit. The first thing I believe that ongoing prayer does, it allows us to keep in step with the Holy Spirit throughout the day. It allows us to synchronize our life with what God is already doing, with the ways that his Spirit is already moving. And the reason I put that in quotations is because it's taken directly from something Paul said in Galatians chapter 5. He says, if we live by the Spirit, if the Spirit is leading us in our life, then let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let's make sure that we are synced up with what the Spirit is doing. An ongoing prayer conversation with God allows us at all times to go, hey God, am I still on the right page here? Is this still what you're doing? Am I still doing the right thing? Is this the way? In fact, I think that's why when I woke up this morning, I had this impression, this is where you wanted me to go. Or I've decided in advance, I've talked to some people about it. But I just want to bring it back to you real quick, almost like you would shoot off a text when you go to the grocery store. It's like, honey, you told me to get the large can, not the small can, right? Like this is what ongoing prayer does. The greatest thing is you don't have to text anybody. You can just be like, Lord, I want to be in sync with you. I don't want to get out of step with you. That's when things become difficult. I want to take on your yoke, so we're carrying this together. This is the rest I want to get. This is the burden being light thing that Jesus talked about. So I want to be in step with you, and that's what ongoing prayer allows us to do. It's important to remember in this, and we've talked about it several times, but prayer is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. Prayer isn't that awkward coffee date where you invite somebody to, and it doesn't have to be a romantic thing, but an awkward coffee meeting where you're sitting across the table from someone and you come ready to talk and they've come ready to look at you. You know what I'm talking about? Like anybody ever had a conversation like that where it's like, man, I'm interested to get to know this person. And then you realize they have no intention of revealing anything about themselves, and it seems like they could care less about you as well. Like, why did you agree to this coffee meeting? You know, like, did you just think that we're like, I'm very handsome, so you just want to look at me, or I'm weird looking or funny? I don't know what it's about. Maybe I'm the only one that's had that experience. And oftentimes, if you're in that experience, it's because you like to talk too much. But the best conversations over a table or with coffee or whatever it might be are the ones that have this beautiful balance of being able to share and reveal certain things, but also being curious and open to listening and reflecting on what's being shared with you. That's the best thing about a conversation. That's the best thing about prayer, that we develop the ability to speak only the words we need to speak. We talked about that a little bit last week to God, like in short bursts sometimes is all it's needed, and then give God time and space to respond or to maybe even prompt us in a different direction than we thought we were going. So that's the first thing. The second thing that ongoing prayer does is it gives us a weapon with which we can fight against daily worries. Right? Jesus talked about this. Like, don't worry about what's going to come tomorrow. Tomorrow is enough concern for its own. Like, there's enough worries for tomorrow. Like, you worry about today and trust that God is going to be with you today. As we think about that song that we sang right before I came up here, like, I kind of just want to come up here and say amen, listen to that song over and over this week. But it does a beautiful job of capturing every single one of the things that I feel like the Bible has revealed about this ongoing dialogue that God intended for prayer to be. Because we live in a world where there is a spiritual battle being fought around us. And I truly believe that some of the things that we are up against in terms of forces of evil look like worry and fear and doubt and anxiety. And again, there are levels to that, and I understand that. And I think if you are stricken with that to the greatest, extent, that it's probably more than prayer that you need. That God would be like, hey, go to me first. And I would always say that. Like, don't go talk to a counselor about something you haven't prayed about. Don't do it. But I strongly think that God would be like, hey, now that we've talked about it, you should go talk to somebody else too. Like, I've actually equipped people to help walk you through this kind of thing. But I'm talking about like when like something doesn't go your way, and you're like, oh, geez, I don't know how this is going to go out. I'm kind of scared. It's like, why not just pray about it? Like, why wouldn't you use this weapon, this gift that God has given you to say, hey, God, like, praying to you reminds me that you're in control, that you're in charge, that you're going to be with me no matter what's going to come, right? In Philippians 4, we've talked about this before, but Paul writes, don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, we talked about that in verse 18, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, this is something that cannot be explained, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Your heart and mind is where all those things attack, right? And isn't it your mind that anxiety and fear attacks? Isn't it your heart that's being attacked when you're nervous about something and almost like paralyzed because you don't know how something's going to turn out? When we pray, what we do is we gain access to resources from the invisible spiritual realm and we draw those from those resources, and we invite the things of God and of heaven into our present physical reality. We're saying, God, there's nothing on earth that we can find that alleviates these feelings, these thoughts that I'm going through. I need a peace that surpasses human understanding, and so I'm going to you because you are the only one that can provide that. I think the other thing that we can kind of take from verses 6 and 7 in this particular passage is like, Paul is talking about praying specifically. He's not saying every time you go to him to like pray for every problem in the world. It's like, hey, Lord, I've got some issues, but first, can we talk about what's happening in the Ukraine? Or can we talk about what's happening on the other side of Jackson? And there is a time and place for all of that. I believe there is. I'll even talk about that towards the end of this message. But like when you're concerned, when you're worried, when you're feared, I think it's one of those short prayers. It's like, God, this terrifies me. You know it terrifies me because you know my thoughts even before I have my thoughts. Will you just help me experience your peace? If you want to change the situation, that'd be great. But more than anything, as I face the situation, help me just better realize and experience your presence in my life that will give me some peace. Another thing about this particular passage that I think can be mistaken and maybe manipulated in a way that leads to some doubt and specifically some frustration with God is that if you take two verses out of context and you just kind of make it your bumper sticker for like, oh, don't worry, be happy, don't worry, pray about it, and you'll be happy, like that, which unfortunately oftentimes happens. And it's not that people have bad intentions, they just take a verse that means something to them and it's like, hey, that worked for me, it should work for you. Is that you can look at this and go, well, okay, God's kind of like a vending machine, right? And like when I go to a vending machine and I need a candy bar, and I'm going to prefer some Reese's product or maybe a Snickers. I walk up to the candy machine. I'm like, man, you know what I could really use right now? I could use a Snickers. And so I look down and I'm like, oh, there it is, E6, right? And so I slide my card now because we're all, up to date with technology and stuff. And I'm like, $1.75, here comes my Snickers. I type in E6 and it starts to turn and then it goes, and then the Snickers doesn't come out, right? Anybody had one of those things? Now I'm looking around. Is there a camera? Can I shake this thing? You know what I'm talking about, that experience. Well, here's the problem with taking this particular verse and applying it in a way that I don't think Paul was talking about, is that sometimes we turn God into a spiritual divine vending machine. And we go to God saying, God, this is what I need. I need you to change the heart of my boss. I need you to change the disposition of my neighbor. I need you to talk to my HOA. I need you to address my wife or my husband because this is not going well. I'm in a miserable experience. This is not good. I need you to do something about it. And when God doesn't answer your prayer exactly the way that you go and ask for him to answer, and by the way, asking him to answer it in a specific way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like the prayer of like, I'm miserable in this relationship. I need you to change the other person. Again, there's probably some immaturity in a prayer like that, but I don't think God looks at it and goes, well, you don't know. I think God goes, well, listen, I'm not limited to just answering that prayer the way you asked it. Like, I think God has a variety of ways of answering prayer that to us, maybe even our experience, like, well, he didn't answer it at all. But God's like, listen, here's what I'll say. I think sometimes God has answered my prayer the exact way that I asked him to do that. And that's amazing. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful for that. But more often than that, God typically has a different answer than the one that I'm seeking out. And if I'm real honest, in retrospect, in hindsight, God's answer to my prayer is almost always better than the solution I was thinking when I went to him in prayer. Now, my ability to say that has taken 25 years of living as a Christian adult and watching God move and watching God respond to prayer requests. And if you're new to the faith, or if you're new to just presenting your request to God, I don't expect you to have maybe the same kind of confidence that God is in fact listening to your prayers that I do. And I would never expect that. And I'm also not going to tell you that I don't still struggle with doubt and sometimes question that God is listening to the things that I'm asking or responding to the things that I'm asking. But I think when God hears our prayer, I think he has a couple of options. So let's just say your problem's with another person, your spouse, your coworker, your neighbor, whatever. And you're like, man, Lord, I just need you to change their heart. I need you to change them. I need you to change their personality. They're terrible. God may be like, okay. Like I used this example in the first, like maybe you get an email on Friday, you screwed up at work, and your boss wants you to see you first thing on Monday morning. Anybody ever had a situation like that where it's like, oh my gosh, it's coming. He's going to drop the hammer. I'm out of a job. And so your prayer all weekend is, Lord, please change the heart of my boss. He seems so mad in the email. How's it going to go on Monday? And it's totally within God's ability to send him to a great church like Grace City, in which a pastor like myself or somebody else gets up and talks about grace and forgiveness and things. And maybe God changes his heart and he shows up on Monday morning and he's like, you know what? I've been thinking about it. You screwed up, but I'm going to give you grace. That's possible. And that might be a way that God answers that prayer. But just as likely might be God saying, hey, you screwed up. I want to change your heart and your posture before you walk into that room. Or in a relationship series, like I need you to change my spouse. I need you to change my friend. They've become an awful person. It's been very difficult to maintain a relationship with them. My parent, my son, whatever it might be. God, change them. And God's like, I could do that, but this tension that you're experiencing, the situation that you're in, actually, the resolution of that isn't that they're changed. The resolution of that is that you're changed. And what I actually want to do because of what you're experiencing, I want to change your heart. I got other plans for them. I want to change them sometime down the road. Or maybe I'm not. They've said no to me and they've kind of chosen a world and a life apart from me. But you can learn from this and I want to change you. So let's lean in. Let's talk about the work we can do. Or maybe it's just like, hey, you got that meeting on Monday at 9 a.m. I can't change him and I can't change what you've done. But what I can promise you is that the two of you are not going to be alone in that room. I'm going to be with you before that meeting. I'm going to be with you in that meeting. And regardless of the outcome of that meeting, I'm still going to be there. So if you're looking for a new job, if you're looking for a new anything, I'm there with you. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm with you. You see, when things happen, it's natural to worry and fear. So we've got to develop this ability to have a first response that is to go to prayer. We've got to develop a habit, a good habit of taking the things that we're concerned about and going first to God and saying, God, what do you want to do about this? Where else should I look to overcome this? And we do this because we believe that he cares about us. Peter wrote this in 1 Peter chapter 5. He said, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God who's in control, so that he may exalt you at the proper time. There's a time and place where God's going to kind of give you victory. And for some of us, that may not be until heaven, but God's got a plan for your life. You do this casting all your cares on him, giving everything you're concerned about, everything you're worried about to him, because he cares about you. If you listen to me, if you read your Bible, specifically the things that Jesus has to say to the church and his early followers, you're going to come very close to knowing that God knows you, loves you, cares about you, and knows exactly about your situation. He knows what you're going through. And because you know that, you can pray a prayer like this, a short prayer with no more words than needed. God, I know you love me. I know you care about me. And I know you know what I'm dealing with. So give me the courage to move forward and let me feel your presence in the midst of what I'm going through. Amen. I'm giving this to you. I'm giving it to you. I can't change the circumstances, so I'm giving it to you. Be with me, change it, do your thing, but just be with me and remind me so that I can have your presence and have your peace, right? The third thing that I think ongoing prayer does is it helps us to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. It helps us to have this posture of being thankful about all things. Think about the two verses that we looked at, the two passages. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it was verse 18. It said, give thanks in everything or in all things, for this is the will of your Father, that you would be grateful. In Philippians 4, verse 6, when he's talking about with prayer and supplication, when you present your request to God, present them with thanksgiving. Old Testament, New Testament, a theme has been consistent that God wants his people to be grateful because God knew when he designed this that gratitude and this attitude of being thankful is actually good for us. Here's a crazy thing. Science is just now catching up with God on this one. I read a fascinating article from the Mayo Clinic this last week as I was studying this of the medical and mental benefits of being grateful. How doctors who aren't believers are prescribing these types of actions where every day I wake up and I list or I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. That the benefit you get, the peace, people sleep better. People have a better disposition about their day. People don't feel as overwhelmed and as anxious because they're focusing on the things that they can be grateful for. God designed us that way. I love it when science catches up with God, you know? Like, I love that. I love every new scientific discovery because it's like, you finally figured it out. Don't you think that God just smiles at that? That's why I would never be scared of science. Like, what are they going to reveal that God hasn't already designed and knows everything about? But I love that about gratitude. God knew this about us. That's why he encouraged us to be grateful, to present our prayers with thanksgiving. Jesus modeled all of this as well. So Jesus, talk about gratitude. Before he raises Lazarus from the dead in John chapter 11, in this very public way, he says, God, I thank you for hearing me. Thank you for hearing me. It's not for my benefit, but you need to know, everybody else needs to know that you actually hear the prayers of your people. So thank you for hearing me. And the very next thing he says, Lazarus, come on out of your tomb. Right? Or you think about when the 72, he sends off 72 of his disciples on like this evangelistic mission, right? In Luke chapter 9, and they come back and they're reporting about all the things that are happening. And they're like, Jesus, we're reading between the lines here and kind of putting it together, but they had to report that certain people were responsive to the gospel message and others weren't responsive, really not the gospel in terms of the death and resurrection yet, but that Jesus had a new way, that there's access to the Father through Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. And they're amazed that certain people did listen and respond and others didn't. And Jesus says, God, thank you. He said, Father, I praise you because you have revealed the truth, not to those who think they're too smart or too wise, but to the poor, the lowly, the children. Thank you for doing that, this posture of gratitude. Jesus also prayed when he had a big day in advance, like the night before the big test. So Luke chapter 6. Jesus is getting ready to pick the 12 disciples. If you read right before that, there's a lot of disciples that are starting to follow him. He's built up quite a following, many disciples. And this is after he's called a few of them, like the ones that we know by name, like Levi or Matthew. But it says the night before he goes out, he prays by himself, and the next morning he gets up and he picks his 12. He knew that he had a very important decision, a very important thing that he had to do the next day. And he wanted to be on the same page as God, in step with the Spirit, before he made that selection of his top 12. We also know that at the end of long days, after things have gone amazingly, for instance, in Matthew chapter 14, we see he just fed 5,000 people, took a couple loaves, bread, this miraculous thing, feeding the masses. And it says at the end of that night, he sent his disciples ahead and he stayed back and he prayed. And can you imagine what that prayer must have been like? Like, we don't have it recorded because it's a private thing, but it's like, Lord, you really showed out today. Like, that was amazing. You know, and I think about myself, like, I'm not like Jesus in that. Like, I'm pretty good at praying, like, before a big decision or before a big thing or, like, before I preach or whatever. But, like, I need to develop a better thing of, like after I preach, God, thank you. Like, thanks for letting that not just go terribly, you know? Like, Lord, thank you for giving me this chance. Like, at the end of a day, when we are exhausted, to find time to go, God, thank you for another day. I just want to reflect on what you did. You really showed up and showed out today, right? And so what I've come up with is, and this is helpful for me, I hope it is for you, are 10 ways that you can pray throughout the day. If you're trying to develop a habit, you're going to look for opportunities to pray. And I think these are opportunities that all of us have to pray. The first one is to pray to start your day. Your feet hit the ground on the side of your bed, and you're like, before you look at your phone, before you do anything else, God, thank you for letting me wake up today. Thank you for letting me live today. Help me live for you. Show me anything you want me to do different than my plans, but thank you for the day. That's a great way to start the day. Pray when you're anxious. God, I didn't see this coming. So if you could, I'm nervous about this. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. I need you. I'm worried about this, God. You know what I'm worried about. Pray when you feel inadequate. I don't know if I'm the only one that every once in a while I feel like I'm in over my head, either being a pastor or a father or a husband or whatever. Like, God, I do not have the skills to do this well. And yet I believe that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I believe that I'm a masterpiece, as Ephesians said, that you've created things for me to do ahead of time. And so I need you to show up and help me with those. Pray to ask for forgiveness. When I was younger, I'll just say less mature, I always had this catch-all prayer at the end of my day. I was like, God, I know I messed up a bunch of times today, so just forgive me for all the things I did wrong. And I recognized somewhere, like probably in my late teens, early 20s, like that's not a helpful prayer. Like it's helpful for me to like actually speak out the things that I've done wrong. And rather than list them all for a day, because that'd be a very long prayer at the end of the night, which I'm trying to catch some Z's, I'm now getting better at recognizing in the moment or immediately following the moment, oh, that was not the right thing to do. I shouldn't have talked to my son that way. I shouldn't have thought about that. Like that person didn't even know I thought that about him, but I shouldn't have thought that way about them. God, will you forgive me? Pray when your heart hurts. I got some news about a coworker that I worked with at my last church a couple weeks ago that it was like a gut punch. And I realized in that moment, I can't do anything about this situation. Like I can't do anything for him. I can't do anything for the church. I am completely powerless. So God, I'm just going to pray because my heart hurts about this, and there's a whole lot of people who are also hurting. Will you do something about that? Pray for protection. Maybe you're driving through a part of town, and you're in downtown Houston, whatever. Like, Lord, I know I'm supposed to be here, but this is scary. So you pray for protection. Also part of the Lord's Prayer, as you remember. Pray for strength and perseverance. God, this is hard. I'm ready to quit. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm thinking about tapping out. I need your perseverance. I need your strength. Pray for more faith and trust in God. When you're starting to doubt, when you're saying, God, are you actually there? Do you actually care? The Bible says you do, and I trust the Bible, but my current experience does not line up with that. I have not felt your presence, your peace in a while. I need more trust. I need more faith. It's like the man said to Jesus, Lord, I do believe. Help my unbelief. Pray to have God's perspective, right? This is not just situations. Like it's easy to go, God, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I need your perspective so I can see everything going on. And he'd be like, you'd be overwhelmed by that, Nathan. For me, this is more like, Lord, that person I just met or that person I have to deal with is intolerable. Like they are a miserable human and I would just rather never talk to them again. And in those moments, I've got to have the maturity to say, okay, God, rather than taking them out of my life, will you just help me see them the way you see them? Will you remind me that you love that intolerable person as much as you love me? Or maybe that's easy because I'm kind of intolerable too, but that you love that intolerable person as much as you love my wife and kids. Like when you look at my wife and kids, you don't love them any more than you love that person that I can't stand. And then the last thing, pray to end your day. If you pray to begin your day and pray to end your day, you've already got 2 prayers right there. You see, developing a list, this isn't like again, there's a lot of scripture to back this up, but this isn't about like the right times to pray. This is about thinking through all the things that you go through each and every day and say, could I pray about this? Would I benefit from talking to God about this? So my encouragement would be to make your own list. What are the common experiences that you keep coming back to? What are the feelings that you have over and over again? Depending on your stage of life, you may be in school and you're overwhelmed because it's much harder than you thought it would be. Or maybe you're in a relationship and it's very difficult. And so to remind yourself, every time I'm about to talk to this person or after every time I've talked to them and I'm really mad or angry or upset, I should talk to God about it. I found this quote this week that I think is helpful. I didn't even know who this guy was, which shame on me, but 19th, 20th century evangelist named R.A. Torrey. He was an evangelist, he was a pastor. He helped start Moody Bible Institute in Chicago and also Biola University, which was called something else out in Los Angeles. But he was known as a man of deep prayer. And he actually wrote a book called How to Pray, which come to find out I probably should have read before this series. But I'm reading it now, and I found this quote in that particular book that I don't know, I just aspire to live like this. So let me share it with you. He writes, our whole life should be a life of prayer. We should walk in constant communion with God. There should be a constant upward looking of the soul to God. And we should walk so habitually in his presence that even when we awake in the night, it would be the most natural thing in the world for us to speak to him in thanksgiving or in petition. Listen, I think ongoing, conversational, constant, continuous communication with God is a habit worth developing. It's one of those good habits that you should try doing. It's our hope that in 21 days of prayer, you develop a habit of praying for maybe something that's outside of the norm, or just spending a little bit of time in God's word and praying and reflecting on what you learned or what God shared in that particular thing. 21 days, they say, is what it takes to build a good habit. That's kind of the idea behind it. But I think developing this sense that I should talk to God throughout my day is worth working on. And it's never going to come first nature. It's not going to be like me biting my fingers or loud outbursts that I'm prone to or things like that, you know. But I think it can become second nature. I think it's something that we can develop. And if it does, I think it might change your life. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I thank you for Grace City. I thank you for the people here that show up each and every Sunday, just curious and open to hearing from you. God, I thank you for the opportunity that I have to study your word throughout the week and try and share things that I believe are your words in an encouraging and helpful and edifying way with people who are trying to please you and follow you in a diligent and worthwhile manner. God, I thank you for the invitation you've given us to communicate with you. Lord, you literally died so that we would have access to you. You died so that we would have a relationship with you. And key to that relationship is communication. It's talking. It's what the Bible calls prayer. And so God, just help us continue to grow in this, that we might gain the benefit that comes along with just having that open line of communication with you. Help us develop ears that are better tuned in to your voice throughout the day, and help us develop a habitual sense of being able to go to you at all times. That our first inclination, our first response when we encounter something good, bad, ugly, whatever, would be to talk to you about it. I pray these things in Jesus' name.